Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. The Lakers fell tonight 132 to 116 to drop to 24 and 16 at the 40 game mark. No Luka Doncic, no Austin Reeves, no DeAndre Ayton, and no Jackson Hayes tonight. So no center rotation centers played well tonight, so I will give them credit. But the typical center rotation was out. First time this season, the Lakers did not have both DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes. Obviously not having Luka Doncic completely changed this game for LA as well. But they were just decimated tonight. They entered the game as underdogs and ended up getting blown out. Had a couple runs where they got it relatively close, but Portland always responded with big shots, big offensive rebounds, big turnovers that led to transition points. And just another one of those nights for LA, though this one to some degree is understandable, just given they did not have any rim protection out there. They did not have a lob threat out there. And of course, no Luka or Austin. But LA drops to 24 and 16 and is now number 6 in the West. They are a half game back of Houston for number 5. They've lost 5 of 6, and they are just 5 and 9 in their past 14 games. 9 and 12 since December 1st. So as we've discussed recently, LA is heading in the wrong direction. This is a tough time to be heading in the wrong direction because after tomorrow, which yes, they play again tomorrow, they have a back-to-back against a rested Toronto team, a Toronto team that did not play tonight. After that, they go out for the Grammy trip. And that's going to be an 8-game road trip. Technically, one of the games is back in LA against the Clippers. But really starting with tonight's game, they're almost on a 10-game road trip because they go Portland, LA, back out to Denver. Then they come back to LA. Then they go out to Dallas. So LA is traveling for 10 consecutive games here. And they're also doing so while they are hitting a critical juncture of the season, but also a critical juncture in terms of the roster just not being healthy and not having available bodies and having to turn to G League players. A couple of those guys played well tonight, and that's going to be one of the big things we touch on. But them playing well did not lead to a win, and that's what the Lakers need right now. Like earlier in the season, we were talking a lot about process over results and some of the things that LA needed to improve upon. They still need to improve upon all those things, but they also need to get the results here. They need to start finding ways to win these games. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what like silver linings we can find. If they keep losing, they're going to find themselves in the play-in. But shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to people tuning in, the real ones, not only after a loss, but after a depleted loss, after a loss on a Saturday night. I appreciate you guys. Quick update. I am in the process of moving for those who are aware. So was moving all day today. We'll be moving all day tomorrow with it being a back-to-back and tomorrow being a game in LA, which I will be attending. I am going to try to keep this show shorter, but at the same time, I always say that, and you guys know I'll go like an hour and a half, 2 hours. So going to try to keep it closer to an hour, but we shall see. So let's get into the game. Buha's big picture is I don't think there's much to take away from this game specifically, so I want to focus on some of the individual performances, and that's going to be a theme tonight because I don't think we can judge this team based on that group they had out there. That group they had out there is a lottery-level group, and they had absolutely no rim protection, which was partly why they had to foul so much tonight, gave up so many offensive rebounds, were so focused on rotating over to the paint that they were leaving guys open at the 3-point line. Like it just was a mess defensively tonight. So my big picture takeaway is the good, the bad, and the ugly with the South Bay prospects. So the Lakers had, I would say 5 guys tonight who I call the South Bay prospects because none of these guys, in my opinion, and I think in the Lakers' opinion as well, are established as like NBA rotation level guys right now. They are all on that borderline of more back-end roster players, not back-end rotation players, back-end roster players who are also on that border of G League guys, two-way guys. Like they're all sort of in the same cluster. And interestingly, the two guys who really stood out tonight were Drew Timme and Kobe Buffkin. And so Drew Timme, 21 points, a career high for him. And he scored in a variety of ways. He hit 3 threes. He is so skilled and talented. And the floater, like in the kind of similar to DeAndre Ayton, he's got a nice runner and a nice floater. So he was attacking that way. Had a couple of nice post-up moves. Had a nice fake where the Red Sea parted for him. He gets to the rim and scores. Like he was awesome tonight offensively. I think a couple things with him, or probably 3 things with him that I think are a reason why we saw it tonight. Like why he's not a roster player right now and why he's not a rotation player for a good team. One, the lack of athleticism really stands out. He's just not really, he's not a good rebounder. And he's also not a rim protector. The Lakers, when he was out there, were resolving to going to hedging or shocking, as JJ calls it, but like aggressive hedging, aggressive trapping with him, or they're going zone. And that's because with him as the last line of defense, like it was layup line, it was offensive rebounds, and he's not a NBA level the defensive center. Like for as good as he is, and again he carried the Lakers for stretches of this game offensively. We clearly saw some of the defense limitations. The rebounding, again, only 4 rebounds in 29 minutes. You need to rebound the ball better if you're getting that type of opportunity. Also got blocked a couple times where it was just like he's lofting the ball up and the defender is like 2 feet above him, and it's just he's more of a ground bound big. But I was really impressed with him, and I don't know what this materializes to because the Lakers already have DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes. Both players are much better rim protectors. I would even say Ayton's obviously a better rebounder. I would even say Hayes is arguably a better rebounder, though that's maybe close there. But those guys as lob threats, as pick and roll partners for both Luka and Austin, and to a lesser degree LeBron, they just fit much better. So I don't know where. Like, my point is, I don't know where the entry point into the rotation is for Timme, but I thought he balled out tonight. He showed out, and Portland isn't the best team, and they're not the best defensive team, though. They do have a lot of defensive firepower. Donovan Clingan is one of the best rim protectors in the league. But I really like what we saw from Drew Timme. And again, I don't know what it's going to actually lead to, but it was nice to see a win for him and nice to see a win for South Bay in that regard, because I think it's been pretty up and down and largely down this season for them in terms of those types of guys, trying to get opportunities. Kobe Buffkin, I thought this was his most complete game. 9 points. 3 of 8 shooting, 1 for 5 on threes. Did miss some good looks from 3, but did cash in that one from the left. Was kind of in between the wing and the corner. Got out in transition one time, attacked the rim, got to the free throw line. And then also defensively, I thought like he was switched on to Jeremy Grant sometimes and holding his own. I've like the defense has really stood out with him, and now he's had a couple of games under his belt. But with him, I think there's more so a path to a potential rotation spot, especially with how Gabe Vincent is playing, which we will touch on a little later. I like he's got to cash in the open looks from 3. Like that's going to be a big thing. And we talked about with these scoring guards. I've talked about it with Nick Smith. I've talked about it with Bronny. I've talked about it with Dalton. Like all these guys have their offensive chops and their ability to attack off the dribble, to get out in transition, to beat someone, off a closeout. But ultimately, like when you're playing on a team with the usage concentration around Luka, around Austin, around LeBron, you need to be able to hit open threes. Like that is the most valuable offensive skill set for any of these perimeter guys. And that is something that, Kobe obviously did not do tonight. Has not done yet for the Lakers, but I like the confidence that he's playing with. And there's still some learning moments for him out there for sure. But I just think in general, especially in comparison to Nick Smith, Bronny, and Dalton, he looks far more confident, far more self-assured, far more like he knows what he's doing out there. And I think that has been a bright spot here over the past couple games. I said the good, the bad, and the ugly because we are now transitioning from the good to the bad and then the ugly. Nick Smith and Bronny both got rotation minutes, and I thought like Bronny got subbed in the first quarter, end of the first quarter with LeBron. Those minutes did not go well. Nick Smith came in. Those minutes did not go well either. He had just an egregious turnover where it was like minimal pressure and he just dribbled the ball off of his foot in a way that sometimes we'll see LeBron do or someone else do, but it's like, it's one thing when you're LeBron doing that. Like you don't want those types of turnovers in general, but when you are a young player still trying to prove yourself, you cannot have that type of turnover. And I thought it just was not like he ended up putting up 5 points, 3 assists, but a lot of that was in garbage time. Just did not like. It's been a rough stint for Nick Smith these last week and a half or so, and I think with Kobe Buffkin arriving, getting the 10-day, I don't know if that's played a part in him maybe overthinking things or what's going on with him, but he has not looked like the same player, since the Kings game, and I think Kobe Buffkin, in my opinion, should be ahead of him right now in the rotation and in the pecking order. And it was odd that they went to Nick Smith, or JJ went to Nick Smith and Bronny before Kobe Buffkin, which made absolutely zero sense to me, especially considering like Kobe's on a 10-day. You're trying to evaluate him in a finite period and trying to make a decision on him. So that was a bit odd, but Kobe ended up playing 22 minutes. Nick Smith only played 10. Bronny played 8. Then, I mean, I don't know if I want to say ugly here, but Dalton didn't even play in the competitive portion of this game. Dalton didn't play the first 43 minutes of the game. He came in at garbage time, and that was JJ waving the white flag. He took out LeBron. They played a couple of possessions, brought in Dalton. That was it. And I thought it was a pretty discouraging sign if you're Dalton. And just sort of, we talk about Dalton as a potential trade candidate right now, or just what his value is. This was a game tailor-made for Dalton to play, and we can retroactively criticize JJ or say that, hey, Dalton should have been given a shot, but he's not been playing well. He did not make the most of that opportunity he just had over the last couple of weeks, especially in that like Memphis, New Orleans, Sacramento stretch. And JJ clearly was just like, he's not earned the playing time. And now comparing him versus Bronny, like that I guess I would still err on the side of Dalton being the obvious choice to play over Bronny. But I think like Kobe and Nick Smith have just contributed more. With Kobe, it's been a couple games, but with Nick Smith, I think he's at least he's had some low lows, but his highs have been higher than Dalton, especially this season, but especially since like he emerged. And thinking back on like that Portland game earlier in the season, the Sacramento game more recently, Nick Smith has had some moments that Dalton has just not really had. And the fact that he could not, in a game when the Lakers were so decimated and needed some additional offensive pop, the fact that he didn't get off the bench until garbage time, that to me was just at least an orange flag, if not a red flag outright, in terms of how just where he's at right now in the hierarchy, how JJ and the coaching staff feels about him. And we've kind of known this, right? Like, because Dalton was phased out of the rotation earlier in the season, but JJ came out a couple of weeks ago. It was like with the current, once Austin went out, it was like Dalton's going to get a shot here. And he just did nothing with it, to be completely frank about it. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than it was a wasted opportunity. And now he finds himself behind Nick Smith, Kobe Buffkin, and Bronny James in the rotation. And it's probably just for one night. I assume if the Lakers have a similar group tomorrow, Dalton would probably play a little bit more. But I don't think he's going to play more than Kobe. And I don't know if he's going to play more than Nick Smith. And that's just like, it's been quite the fall from grace for him. And at this point, I think he's merely a throw-in into a trade and not actually like the centerpiece for even like a smaller move that I think we would have once viewed him as. In terms of notable performers, I already touched on some of the young guys, so I'm going to breeze through them. But Marcus Smart led the Lakers with 25 points. And this was the type of performance the Lakers could have used in some other games that Marcus Smart was heavily involved offensively. But 25 points, 9 for 17 shooting, 4 for 6 on threes, 3 for 5 on free throws. Marcus brought out the bag tonight. I don't know. We occasionally see that, right? But he's breaking dudes off the dribble, and he's not just breaking like regular guys off the dribble. There was some taking Drew Holiday, taking Tamani Kamara. Like there were some real defenders that he took off the dribble and was able to score on or create separation against. And he had that stretch in the second quarter where he hit multiple threes, and he's like relocating into open threes and cashing those. It was just a really solid game for Marcus. Defensively, this is a tough matchup for him, just as it was for most of the Lakers' perimeter defense in terms of the athleticism gap. Not so much with Drew Holiday, but anytime he was matched onto Shaedon Sharpe was basically able to create separation and either get downhill or hit or get a good look from three. So I'd say like a solid Marcus game. Was not one of his best defensive games, but offensively, he carried a big burden tonight. LeBron had 20 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, just 6 for 16 shooting, 1 for 3 on threes, 7 of 7 at the free throw line, 1 steal, 2 blocks, 4 turnovers. LeBron got off to a slow start, and I think he started the game. I know he was 3 for 10 at one point, but I think that was after a make, so it might have been like 2 for 9 or something like that. Did not like the start to the game, and the unfortunate thing was that this was the type of game with no Luka, with no Austin, with no Ayton, that the Lakers needed like probably 35, 12, and 11 from LeBron or something like that to have a real shot in this game. And I thought once we saw that first shift, and the Lakers actually lost the LeBron minutes in his first 6 minutes, it was sort of like, okay, this might be a long night if LeBron can't quite get it going. I do think he played much better after that opening shift. And I think especially in the second half, we saw some urgency from him defensively. He had the chase down block. He had even the flagrant on Klingon. I thought he was at least being active and breaking up a lob. But it was not, I would say, like not a good defensive performance in the first half. And that was partly why, not the full, like there was many reasons why the Lakers were down, but that was a factor in LA being down at the half so convincingly. So I think LeBron continues to look at his best when he is attacking out of the post and getting downhill. When he is settling for jumpers or playing more on the perimeter, I don't think he has looked as strong just in the totality of a season. For me, this is probably his worst game since the Detroit game on December 30th. So we're going back almost 3 weeks. But it's also, we have to remember, this is 5 games in 7 nights. So this is now LeBron's, 4th game in 6 days. And he played on the back-to-back. We'll see if he ends up playing tomorrow. But I also feel like fatigue was probably a factor here for him in particular, and it's totally understandable as a 41-year-old that he would feel some level of fatigue. So I think we do have to factor that in when talking about him. Maxi Kleber. Maxi Kleber scored 9 of the Lakers' first 14 points. He had a double pump dunk. He had, I think I was talking about Timmy earlier. I was mixing up one of their plays because Maxi hits a above the break 3 on a pick and pop. Then the next possession, he pump fakes Klingon, beats him off the dribble and lays the ball in with his left hand. First play of the game, they run a LeBron Maxi pick and roll, and he gets fouled and hits a couple free throws. And the coaching staff had a great laugh at that. But like, this was by far Maxi's best game as a Laker, in my opinion. Certainly on the offensive end, but I would say in totality, clearly he is not a rotation big right now, just because there's he's. I think the lack of athleticism and just him being, and I think it's just he's had so many lower extremity injuries and surgeries and whatnot that he is not the same switchable big. Like, he still has got the IQ, and you see he's able to funnel guys to certain spots, and like I do really like the way he plays from an IQ perspective, and he just does all these little things like the Gortat screens tonight. Gortat screen, you roll and you sort of keep rolling and sort of are setting an illegal screen as you are rim running. He did plenty of that tonight for LeBron or Marcus Smart. So he does like little things like that. Like he's got the dirty trickery down. And I mean that with all due respect. Like I mean that in a very positive way. He just does all these little things of kind of setting illegal screens and sort of like blindsiding guys in a way that will open up a shooter for a flare screen or a shooter for a back cut or something. So I really like that part of his game, but him scoring 9 points in the first 4 minutes of this game was not on anybody's bingo card. And it was really fun to see. Of course, like Lakers should not be in a position where Maxi Kleber is starting and playing 21 minutes. And that is more so a commentary on the state of their center position right now. But he gave some hard fouls. Again, with him, they ended up going to some zone. There was some switching. He's not a drop rim protecting big. And when they did run drop with him, I thought Portland was walking into uncontested mid-range jumpers, which was a bit of an issue tonight. Jake LaRavia, disappointing game for him. It feels like it's like with Jake and Marcus, they just trade off like who has a big offensive night and like occasionally they'll both have a nice offensive performance, but it's typically like one of those two is making shots, making plays. The other one has a pretty quiet night. 2 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 steal. There was an injury scare with Jake, who already has his arm and elbow wrapped up, but he ended up being okay. Entered the game. One quick thing with Marcus actually is he banged knees in the fourth quarter, and JJ said he's unclear if he's going to play tomorrow. So that is now another potential injury on the docket for LA. Off the bench, already mentioned Drew Timme, already mentioned Kobe Buffkin. Vando, I thought, had relatively quiet game, had the nice block on, I want to say, was it Grant or Sharp? I don't remember. It might have been Grant. That he had the nice like Rui funneled him into Vando, and then Vando blocked it. Then he had the steal, got out in transition, or collected the ball, got out in transition, and had a dunk. 6 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. The rebounding has slipped a little bit with Vando lately. I feel like he hasn't been as impactful on the glass as he was when he reemerged in the rotation. So that's something to note here. I just feel like he hasn't been winning and dominating the rebound battle the way that he did a bit earlier. If we go back to like early to mid December. And then Rui, some signs of life with him. He's scored 11 points. 7 of those 11 came in the third quarter. He hit like not really a step back three, but sort of a step back three. I mean, he dribbled behind his back and created some separation, and then it was a little bit I would say like slow, so it wasn't like the sexiest step back three, but he hit that. He also had a couple of baskets coming off movement screens and scoring. Like LA just did not really involve him. This has been a trend going on like a month and a half, almost 2 months of Rui just not really being a big part of the offense for whatever reason, but had a couple steals, had a block, only 1 rebound, still was on a minutes restriction, only played 19 minutes tonight. But I thought this was clearly his best game since he's returned and started to look more like Rui. Then we have Gabe Vincent, who I will touch on with one of my takeaways. Stat of the night, 22 first quarter free throws for Portland. The Lakers fouled them 13 times. It's funny because the Lakers are often on the other side of this where teams can't stop fouling them, and they're the team going to the free throw line for 12, 15, 18 free throws in a quarter. But LA they finished with only 25 fouls, so they're able to keep it in check the rest of the game. But I thought, to be completely honest, like a couple of those I were certainly questionable or / bad. I thought a lot of them were honest fouls. And once the Lakers got into the bonus, it's like anytime you're fouling someone, you're sending them to the line. It was a combination of they could not contain the ball at the point of attack. They were repeatedly beaten off the dribble, possession after possession after possession. And then guys would have to rotate over, and then guys are late on these on their help. And then all of a sudden they're reaching in and they're slapping and slapping arms. And it was not just the point of attack, it was the rim protection. Because, again, Maxi Kleber and Drew Timme are not shot blockers. They are not rim protectors. They are not a presence down there. So it was a lot of Portland would beat that initial point of attack, get to the rim, and then the Lakers would sort of overreact or try to overcorrect. I did like in general, like the level of physicality there, and LA has often not played with physicality. So I want to at least give them some credit for playing with physicality and trying to be the team that sets the terms of engagement. They just clearly took it a little bit too far, and it ultimately ended up backfiring and was the reason why they were down in the first quarter. Then 3 quick takeaways here before we get into the Q&A. Takeaway number 1, just slew of injury updates. Luka Doncic, DeAndre Ayton, and Jackson Hayes are all day today. All could potentially play tomorrow. All could potentially miss tomorrow. Marcus Smart, it seems like he is now going to be in that mix of potentially missing tomorrow, or he's sort of in that day-to-day zone for right now. So nothing else to really say. Like if the Lakers don't have their 2 centers, they really miss DA and Jackson tonight. And even with DA's been up and down lately, and they've been without Jackson for the last few games, they just did not have the lob rim running, pressure threat, and then also the rim protection that those guys provide, which, like, granted, the Lakers are one of the worst rim protecting teams in the league, but there's still a difference between funneling someone into DeAndre or Jackson versus funneling them into Maxey or Drew Timme. And then Luka, his absence, of course, we don't need to explain that. He is the central part of their offense. And I think the offense was like solid tonight, all things considered, especially with who was out, but did not look to be at the normal level. Then takeaway number 2 is the Gabe Vincent conundrum, because the Lakers are so decimated right now that I understand the logic behind playing Gabe a certain amount. I did not understand the logic of starting Gabe. I think tonight I would have probably gone Vando, especially with the context of Rui being on a minutes restriction. I think for at least right now, and this is going to be interesting to see how they handle this once Rui's off the minutes restriction in terms of his starting role. But with the context of Rui being in, on a minutes restriction, I would have leaned Vando just to try to set the tone defensively, have that Vando, Laravia, Smart, and even Maxey. Like, Maxey's been a part of some of LA's best defensive lineups, despite the lack of rim protection, because he's been able to switch. And those lineups can't score, but they can defend. And then you have LeBron out there. So it's like, Marcus is the secondary ball handler. You have theoretically some shooting with Kleba and Laravia and Smart. I think that would have been the way I would have gone. I would have not gone with Gabe Vincent, especially with the context of who Portland starts, because there was not a good matchup for Gabe in the starting group. He's too small for Drew Holiday. He's too small for Shaedon Sharpe. Kamara, okay, I mean, you could put him in a help position off of Kamara, but that doesn't really make sense. You're already doing that with LeBron. And then, Sissoko also, what was too big for him, was taking him off the dribble. So this was I would say the second straight game where the Gabe minutes were like downright destructive. And like, he was, I think sometimes Gabe, people, all right, cardio Gabe, I know there's the nickname, and people will look at the numbers and it's like, okay, Gabe was kind of out there, but you didn't really notice him necessarily. He just sort of was, maybe he took a couple shots and maybe he got targeted a couple times, but like, he's out there, he's playing solid positional defense, and he's at least like just sort of out there, right? What we'll say. The last 2 games have been just, again, downright destructive in terms of he's being targeted left and right. Teams are progressively just like, this dude's 6'2" and cannot guard anyone 6'5" or above off the dribble or in the post. And they're like targeting him with role players too. It's not just the stars. Like, of course, Shaedon Sharpe isn't going to be able to target Gabe Vincent, but Sissoko was taking Gabe off the dribble and scoring on him. And it was like, this is like just really bad defense at this point. And then it's also like at the 3-point line where he's closing out, especially against like Sharpe. You see Sharpe is rising up, and Sharpe already has, a few inch height advantage on him. But Sharpe is rising up, and Gabe's like not even reaching his face. And Sharpe is all the way in the air, just like calmly cashing in a three. And it's just like he's become increasingly more of a defensive liability, to say nothing of the offensive end, where he has been pretty inconsistent and his shot does vary. But going off the past 2 games, he's 1 for 13 and 1 for 9 on threes. And that's terrible. Like I don't know how else to spin this, right? So the Lakers are in a tough spot right now because I do think there's certainly a drop off defensively to like a Nick Smith. Like for as much as Gabe can be targeted, I still think he's a better defender than Nick Smith. And I don't think Bronny is ready for rotation minutes. I mean, Dalton is certainly a worse defender, even despite being a bit bigger than Gabe. But I do look at Kobe Buffkin as like, if you need someone in that role, I think at this point, I like Kobe. It's 2 games, so you don't want to like entirely base everything off of that. But Kobe has been better than Gabe the last 2 games, and he's at least 6'5" with a certain amount of athleticism, and he is pressuring and holding his own defensively. I would go that way because this has been bad. Like it's been really destructive of. I mean, he's the shot selection. Like he's getting run off the 3-point line, and then he can't do anything inside the arc. And I look at Marcus Smart, and I'm like, that is sort of what they wanted Gabe Vincent to be, in terms of a bit of a wild card who on any given night can pop off for 12, 15, 18, 20. And Marcus takes plenty of bad shots, and he has plenty of turnovers. And like there's certainly a downside with Marcus, but I feel much better when Marcus is taking a shot right now or trying to make a play than Gabe Vincent, which like going into the season, that wouldn't have necessarily been the case based on their perceptions in terms of who they are as offensive players. So yeah, it's gotten bad. And it just feels like they are. And look, he technically was a +4. He had the best plus minus in the starting group. I don't really care about that. I'm basing this off of the eye test and in rewinding certain plays and just sort of the defensive mistakes. Like he was not out there for some of the runs that happened, but I just thought he was bad tonight. I thought he was really bad, obviously, last game. And I don't really know what the Lakers do, because it does feel like they're playing someone who should not be in the rotation right now. And not only are they playing him, I mean, tonight he started and played 23 minutes. And then third and final takeaway is the stretch leading into the trade deadline. So the Lakers are hitting the stretch run here, where after tomorrow's game, they go on the Grammy trip, and the Grammy trip takes them into the trade deadline. They come back, and the next game they play is February 5th against Philly, but that is after the trade deadline. So tomorrow is the Lakers' final home game until the trade deadline. And this upcoming stretch is going to determine how the front office views them to some degree, right? And with the way that they're playing, like it would not be, I assume they'll be underdogs tomorrow against Toronto, who again is rested on, second night of a back-to-back for LA, also 5th game in 7 nights. They lose tomorrow, and now there's an even bigger gap between them and Houston for that 5-6 spot. Phoenix continues to win. They just had a big win today in New York. The Lakers are in jeopardy of dropping into the play-in, and like Golden State's been playing better recently. All of a sudden, you could blink, and if they start this road trip 1-2, 1-3, something like that, they could already be in like the 7 or 8 seed mix, and that can happen sooner than expected. So the Lakers, like this is a critical part of their season in terms of showing that we've talked it through. Like, I don't know which way they're going to go in terms of how they view the roster and how they view the trajectory of things. But again, if we're sitting here on February 3rd, right, and the Lakers haven't made a move and they're like the 7 or 8 seed, I do think it's worth asking, like, is this team worth investing in? Is this group worth trying to save, compared to if they can find a way to rally here over the next 8-9 games and at least go 4-5, 5-4, be in that mix and sort of tread water and stay in the top 6. I think that could put some more pressure of like, hey, we're still right there with Houston. We're still right there with Minnesota. Just give us a little boost here, push us over the edge, because otherwise again, like if they fall to 7-8, and I know it's a very fine line there in terms of, it might just be semantics and window dressing with where they're at in the standings. But this group, again, has lost 5 of 6, is just 5-9 over their past 14, and is just 9-12 since December 1st. And one big thing that has happened during that stretch has been Austin has missed a majority of it, but they've also had obviously Luka injuries. LeBron has missed a couple games in there. DA's missed some time. Jackson's missed some time. Rui's missed some time. Like there's no assurances they're going to get healthy. Like we keep kind of thinking about what's the full strength starting lineup, or when this guy comes back, even tonight, Marcus potentially goes out or potentially misses tomorrow's game coming off of tonight. It's just like they've been bit by the injury bug, and I don't think we can assume they're going to get healthy. I think they have to find ways to win despite being injured, despite not having the full group. And so far, they haven't really been able to do that. They did it earlier in the season, but it feels like the injuries have come back, and this has been more of what we assumed they would play like when they are depleted. But yeah, it's a really critical stretch here because 8 of the next 9 are on the road. They have some winnable games in there, but they also have some really tough games, and some of those sub 500 teams are playing much better recently. So we'll see where things go. But again, I think they're at a bit of a crossroads here, and they're gonna the results of the next 8 or 9 games. I do think will play some role in what they ultimately do at the trade deadline. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. Christian, thank you for the super chat. I thought we were losing games because of Luka's defense. I saw a lot of this on X from Laker fans, Luka fans, both. I don't know. I mean, sure. Like I don't think I have been saying that's why. I don't know if this is pointed at me or just the general Lakers media or NBA media. I think Luka, I think if anything that they lost more tonight because they didn't have a playable center defensively, and that was a big part. But I mean, if anyone thought they would be better without Luka, I don't think the defense was the defense was not necessarily better tonight. I would say if anything, it was actually worse. I don't know again how it's hard to separate how much of that was not having Luka, how much of that was not having DA and Jackson. I do think it was more that because the Lakers were a bit smaller tonight. But if anyone is saying they think they're going to be better without Luka, I don't agree with that reasoning. I understand that people can be frustrated with the shot selection or the turnovers or the style of play. And we've talked about those things at various points. But at least if you're tuning into my show, I'm not blaming Luka's defense as the primary reason the Lakers are losing games. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. Rob has to go no matter the result of the deadline since the title has done a horrible job roster building. Nico gifting him Luka should not save him. We've talked about this. There's not a criticism of the front office that I really disagree with. And I talked about this on Lakers Collective the other day that my understanding is he's going to be, so there was the report from Dave McMenamin that he reported on Alan Slewa's show that JJ and Rob are going to be safe for the next 5 years. And the goal is to have Jeannie as the governor for the next 5 years or 5+ years. And Rob and JJ are in lockstep with that. I have not heard that, so I cannot comment on that, but Dave is obviously very plugged in and, is one of the best, reporters covering a team in the business. So I take that at face value for what he reported. What I've heard is more so just there's a lot of Rob earned it, has continued to earn, in the eyes of the stakeholders and decision makers, confidence and belief, in large part because of the Luka trade and how the magnitude of that trade. He obviously earned a contract extension, and I have not heard any buzz or hot seat with Rob at all. So I know fans are upset. I know fans want changes. I get it. I think pretty much all the criticism I see and read of the front office is valid and is warranted. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing behind the scenes in terms of their confidence and belief and the security that he has. I do not think Rob is on the hot seat. I do not think Rob is in jeopardy of losing his job. They signed him to an extension last year. And remember, as I've said it before, like Mark Walter signed off on that extension. Mark Walter, they were negotiating the sale as that extension happened. You do not extend Rob without the blessing of Mark Walter. So could that change? Certainly, that there's always a possibility that potentially changes. But I would be pretty surprised if that. I think he's going to be in charge and into at least 2027. And then if everything goes wrong, maybe there's a different conversation there. But I think this is going to go into at least next season and potentially beyond. And again, based on some of the other reporting that's been out there, could be going into like 2030. So I don't know. Peter Salmon, thank you for the super chat. Denver winning games without multiple starters. Clippers best record in NBA over past month. Injuries, excuses only go so far. Coaching needs to be looked at. I agree with this. I don't. You're not going to get pushback from me. Denver has been a shining example to me of they've been winning without Jokic. They've been winning games recently without Jokic and Murray, which I think is a pretty close analog to LA not having Luka and Austin. Like they've been able to win some of those games. I mean, if you look at like, I know LA is comparable to them in terms of probably total missed games due to injury. But I was looking at, this was a couple games ago, but they'd played like 40, 41 games, and Aaron Gordon had played in 19 of them. So Aaron Gordon, who is their third best player and was having a great start to the season, has missed over half the season. Christian Brown had played 14 games up to that point. Cam Johnson had also missed. So it's like the Lakers have their own version of that to a degree. I think it's been more dispersed throughout the roster, and now Austin's absences are starting to add up. But outside of missing the first 14 games, LeBron has been pretty healthy and pretty available. He's rested a couple back-to-backs, but LeBron's basically been back. Luka has been primarily healthy, or I mean, he's been banged up, but like available, I would say, for a lot of the season. And then you get into some of the other guys, and like Rui's been banged up lately. DA and Jackson have of course, like missed games here and there. But I think Denver's just straight up like lost more important minutes and games with just the extent of most of their starting group has been injured for a serious stretch of time. And that's not been the case for a team like the Lakers. And Denver's continued to win. And that's where the injury stuff does ring hollow for me to a degree of, it's the name of the game. Like, you're going to be injured. The Lakers have been injured more than most teams. So I acknowledge that, and I give them some level of grace. But you do hear some of the injury excuses a little bit more than I feel like you hear it with other teams. And I do think at some point there's like a culture thing there of, and the thing is, they had it earlier in the season where I think about in this very building that they just played in tonight, they had one of their better wins of the season in terms of being shorthanded and the guys stepping up. That has kind of gone out the window, and it's just been guys haven't really stepped up, and it's sort of like when they're depleted, they're just depleted, and they look like a team that's depleted and they get blown out. So that's something that they have to overcome. But I agree with you. I think the excuses only go so far. Part of it is certainly on the coaching, and I think JJ's been getting more creative defensively, but the offense has not been where it needs to be. And that is something that I think they have to figure out, because again, we know this group is limited defensively. I'm giving up hope on them being a top 15 defense. I think at this point I would take 17th or 18th in like an optimistic sense, but they have to be a top 5 offense, and they have not consistently sniffed that. And part of it is the stars who have been out to some degree. I think they've really missed Austin, but I also think part of it's been some of the bad habits with the lack of organization offensively. I think the predictability to some degree of some of the same actions and things they run. not having counters to certain, like, we've talked about the drop coverage and the inability to counter against that at times. Like, but yeah, so I put some of it on the coaching staff for sure. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Biggest takeaways are two ways are better than 8 through 14. I'm glad you made that point because Kobe Buffkin's technically not a two-way. He's right now a roster player as a 10-day guy, but if we want to lump him in there, let's lump him in there. Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think there's a clear top 7, which are Luka, Austin, LeBron, DA, Marcus, Rui, Jake. Those are the top 7 guys. I would put Vando and Jackson at 8 and 9 in some order, and put those guys on the side of being better than the two ways. But once you get to the Gabe and Dalton and Adu and Maxey and Bronny part of the rotation, I do think, Drew Timmy just had a better game than Dalton has had all season. Better game than Maxey's had all season, better game than Bronny's had all season, better game than Adu's had all season. I don't know if I'm missing anybody. You could argue better game than Gabe's had all season as well. And then Kobe obviously didn't pop in the same way that Timmy did tonight, but I think he has shown he's bigger than Bronny, he's bigger than Gabe. I think he's also been pressuring the ball more consistently and holding up defensively. And again, it's been 2 games, but just on the sample size we have, certainly better than Dalton defensively. So yeah, I think I would probably push this to 9 through 14 rather than 8 through 14, but I don't disagree. I think that's a bit concerning. The back end of the roster is really rough. Kalen Jones, thank you for the super chat. Kobe, Drew, Nick all had more points than Gabe. Gabe's just negative on both sides of the ball at this point for us. We need to call it how it is. That's exactly what I said in my takeaway. I don't know if you sent this in before that or not. But yeah, he's now I am holding out a little bit of hope in at least in the offensive side, because I think Gabe, he was shooting 39% going into the last couple games on threes. It's obviously going to dip tonight. He'll probably be around 35% for the season. Maybe that's just more in line with where he evens out. He is going to be an up and down player with the shot, but I actually think, to echo the point I made last game, I think the defense has been more of a concern for me, where teams are really targeting him relentlessly and the Lakers aren't countering it. And Gabe is either getting scored on or fouling or both. And that's a bad place to be in. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Really disagree with people hating the JK fit. More holes than just a 3-and-D guy on the roster. He's not a 3-and-D, but helps other areas. We severely lack athleticism, downhill attacking, finishing at the rim. And then says, have very 2018 Cavs vibes. Team needs complete bench overhaul. GS gets MPJ. Brooklyn gets Moody, Rui, Gabe, Maxey, Vando, Golden State first, LA first. LA gets Kuminga, Buddy, Mann, Highsmith. Add athleticism, shooting, two-way depth, more balance. Okay, it's a big trade too. This would be one of the biggest trades in NBA history, just in terms of how many players are actually moving. Because right here I see this is 10 players. That I think there's been some 13, 14 player trades, but 10 players is a lot for a trade. Anytime there's a 3-team trade, it is tough to get all 3 teams to. It's tough enough to get 2 teams to agree to a trade. It's really tough to get 3 teams to agree to a trade. But looking at this from each side, so Golden State gets MPJ. They give up Kuminga, Buddy, Moody, and a first. I think Golden State would think that's a little high, but I think that's probably in the right vicinity. I really like Moody, so but it seems like he just hasn't quite fit in there. My guess would be Golden State would say that price is they want a first for Kuminga, not but I guess if you're giving him up for MPJ, it makes sense. I also wonder about the roster spots here on the Golden State side of giving up 3 players and only getting back 1. From the LA side, so long-term money, you're flipping Vando for Man. So you're adding still a couple of years, but you're adding some money. I don't know Buddy's contract off the top of my head. Is he expiring? Buddy, no. But Buddy's, it's 9.7, 10, so that's fine. And then I do like Haywood Highsmith, even though he's been banged up for most of the year. From the Brooklyn side, you're getting a bunch of expirings. I don't think Brooklyn would love taking on the Vando contract, but you are getting 2 firsts. So that is something like a first for MPJ, a first for taking on Vando, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think, like in the realm of possibility, or I think you could make arguments for all of the 3 teams. I think you could also make counterpoints. My Kuminga stance is not, I'm more on board with Kuminga as a potential fit in terms of his skill set and his talent. My biggest fear, and I will continue to echo this, is the mental part of it. And I just that's hard to quantify. And certainly right now people are going back and forth in terms of like, it's the Warriors' fault, it's Kuminga's fault. I fall a little bit more in the middle. If anything, I'm probably more on like it's more Kuminga's fault side, just because just some things I've heard and stuff. I just feel like to be on like the bad graces of that coaching staff to the degree that he has been, I think that's just again like a yellow to orange flag for me. So I just have real concerns about him buying into a smaller role with LA, especially when he's trying to get paid this summer. That's my thing here, right? Or trying to get paid like his next deal. That's my thing. But I'm not like fully out on it. But to your like, the other thing is like, if you're just basically replacing Rui with Kuminga, I think you're improving defensively, but you're getting much worse in terms of like the shooting and the playing off the ball. Like he is more of an on-ball guy. So I think you take a step back this season. Maybe you take a step forward in the future. I'm not ruling that out, but I don't know. I see the fit with him on the court. I just think there is a mental component here that we can't overlook, and we can't just wish cast that, oh, he's going to come and because he's not in Golden State, he's not playing for Steve Kerr, he's going to buy into everything JJ says, he's going to be the 4th or 5th option on LA. Like that's not who he wants to be a number 2 or number 3 option. And as long as Luka, LeBron, and Austin are on the team, he's not going to be that. So that's where I think there's a little bit of dissonance there of like who he can be versus who he wants to be. And that's my biggest Kuminga issue. Ryan Lucas, thank you for the super chat. Has to be something up their sleeve. No way LA stands pat and sells summer. Who is coming in the summer? Not how it works. Strategy makes no sense. I agree. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I've made some version of that argument for the past like 3 years, and they did pull off the Luka trade one of those years, but that was something that you like. They were not planning for the Luka trade in December. That was something that popped up in January, and then they moved in that direction and executed it. But the plan in December was like try to go get a DFS trade, DFS type, and then maybe do like another smaller move. And that was going to be the plan. And then a big, thing fell into their lap with the Luka deal. I would not rule this out though. They've sold, or they've tried to package and sell it to the fan base before of future flexibility, optionality, future picks, the moves they can make next summer or the following season or whatever. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I continue to think like they're probably going to do something. I just think fans will probably be disappointed with the scale of the move they make. In part due to their reluctance to give up certain things in trades, and also in part with who's available right now. And there's just not a lot of difference makers out there currently, especially with the lack of attractive assets that the Lakers have. Then Nala, again, thank you for the super chat. Not using the expirings now makes 0 sense. Weak free agent class. Nuggets not letting Watson go. We won't have any tradable contracts next year with no expirings. Really good points. And that's why I've said I think the Lakers basically have to trade Gabe Vincent and Maxey. Rui's a trickier one because I think there is a chance that they end up extending or re-signing him. So if you don't move him, I think that is a step in that direction of probably keeping Rui. I would be open to trading Rui as well, personally, but it doesn't, like, I think that's where, I mean, again, the team's perception of Rui versus, I think, like my perception and maybe his like league-wide trade value, I think there's a bit of a gap there. And that is something that, you know, it is what it is. And they might just end up keeping him. But certainly with Gabe and with Maxey, I think it's a mismanagement of those assets if you don't end up flipping them for something. And, you know, that I think will be worthy of criticism if LA doesn't make a move. Sean asked if I have speculation on when the Lakers get Austin back. There's been like no real updates on that. I would speculate here, and please don't aggregate or quote me on this, but you know, I can't control that because it happens every show. I still think like late January, early February, like probably before the trade deadline. That assumes he hits certain checkpoints, and we're still probably like 2 to 2.5 weeks away from that period. So a lot could change, but tentatively, I think late January into early February, like at some point on the second half of the road trip, I think is a possibility, but the Lakers could be extra cautious, or he could have a setback and then it ends up bleeding into, you know, closer to the All-Star break or even potentially after the All-Star break. So if I had to peg, I would probably peg like the last couple of days of January into that first week of February as like a general range. All right, going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes here if you guys got questions. Tristan asked, do you think LeBron plays on the back-to-back tomorrow? Good question. I wonder. Let's see. So he spoke. No one has tweeted anything yet, so I don't know what. Doesn't seem like LeBron said anything about whether he's playing or not tomorrow. I'd probably lean yes, but I also acknowledge LeBron said even after the previous back-to-back that he's going to be TBD for every back-to-back moving forward, and it's going to be how he feels the day of. So I think LeBron probably doesn't even know right now. Like, it's partly going to be determined by how he wakes up, how he feels, and then going through, like, I assume he'll be listed as questionable and be a game time decision. And then it'll be similar to the last back-to-back where he has to go through his pregame warm-up and then ultimately decides. I'd probably lean 55-45 him playing, but I would not fault him if he does not play because it's the 5th game in 7 nights, which for a 22-year-old NBA player, that is a tough slate. And the NBA has really tried to limit those 5 games in 7 nights, like your 2 back-to-back sets in a week. They've tried to limit that for everyone. But then when you factor in he's 41 and is TBD on all these back-to-backs, like I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up missing. And my first inclination when I saw Luka was out was I wondered, okay, are they going to play LeBron in the first game and then play Luka in the second game? LeBron sits out the second game. One thing with LeBron is that he loves playing in Portland because Portland is the Nike headquarters and LeBron is Mr. Nike. And I mean, that is obviously has got his ties with Cleveland and it currently has his ties with the Lakers, but Nike's I give a big shout out to Ethan Strauss, who was on this during his time at ESPN, and also has continued to be on it with his Substack, of like a lot of the stars, like we associate the stars with the team that they play on, but really, especially for the mega stars, they're almost more associated with like the brand that they are repped by, because LeBron is going to be with Nike far beyond his NBA career. And it's going to end up being like, however long he wants it to be, but 60, 70 year partnership, something like that. Like, that's different than playing 5 years for a team, 8 years for a team, 10 years for a team. So LeBron loves playing in Portland, showing out for all the Nike execs and all those people out there. And so I knew, like when I saw the back-to-back, I was like, I think LeBron's going to play in Portland, because that's just been a thing. Like you see LeBron rarely misses a game in Portland. That there have been some times he has, but like if he can play in Portland, he will play in Portland. It's not Utah. Utah's the opposite, where LeBron loves not playing in Utah. That's kind of been a running joke. But yeah, I would lean like yes, but not. Again, it just depends how he feels. Madison asks, Luka got an MRI for what? Luka got an MRI for his groin, because that's the injury he's been dealing with since the Sacramento game. He ended up tweaking it. So yeah, he's banged up right now. Kane Carter, hey Jovan, when people say Austin's hyped by the Lakers hype machine, I really think Rui fits that depiction. I think his brand plus LA make him look better than he is. They need to move him ASAP. I think like Laker role players can be overhyped or underhyped depending on who the player is. I think we've seen some guys have been underrated playing in LA. Some guys have been overrated, and it can, like, because the Lakers have the biggest fan base and the most vocal fan base, it can cut both ways in terms of overhyping a player or underhyping a player. And, a guy comes to LA and doesn't play well, all of a sudden he stinks, but then he could have just had an off year and then go somewhere else and does great. And then all of a sudden it's like back to, oh, well, this guy's actually pretty good. Where the inverse can also happen, where maybe a guy stinks in general, has a good year at the Lakers, and then all of a sudden he reaches a certain perception and then goes elsewhere, and maybe he's not that. So I think just because of how much attention is on the Lakers and their role players and the ebbs and flows of the season, I think that can lead to grand proclamations in either direction. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, because I think, it depends who you talk to. Maybe with some Laker fans and maybe even with the Lakers themselves, I would agree maybe a little bit here. I think in general, at least people I talk to, like most people view Rui as a fringe starter / high level bench player who is like a good shooter and just a solid offensive player overall, but there are the limitations with the defense and the rebounding. And I think, at least when I have conversations about Rui or about LA making a trade, I think there's a more sober reality as to like who he is and what his limitations are. So I don't necessarily agree, but I'm not fully there with the last part, but I think it's at the point where I would be open to moving him depending on the trade. Julian, hi Jovan, do you think Luka's really disappointed with Rob in the front office for not making any moves at the deadline? I heard on another podcast that it might have been better to trade Luka instead of AR. I disagree with the last point. I don't think they should trade either of those guys. I think the limited data we've had on Luka and AR together has actually been really positive. I know there are people who don't like Luka who don't want to hear that. There are people who don't like Austin that don't want to hear that. But Luka and Austin on the floor together, especially this season with the jump that Austin has made, that has been like the numbers they've been killing teams offensively, and they've been holding their own defensively. I know that's counterintuitive for some people because you see Luka getting blown by or Austin getting scored on or powered through by a bigger player, but the data with those two specifically on the floor has been positive. So I think there's certainly limitations to building around. I do not deny that if you have Luka and Austin, you need to nail the other three starting spots, and it needs to be athletes, defense, motor, all that stuff. It does require a certain roster build. This isn't like you can just pick whichever three front court players and it's going to be a great team. Like, no, you need to nail it. You need a certain type. Ideally, one of those three front court players is an all defense type of guy, if not a couple of them, but at least one of them. Lakers currently do not have that. So, I mean, we could talk about like this year's team, but like more so in the future, building around those guys. I still think it can work with the right build, but the right build, you got to nail it, and it is difficult. And I do have some concerns because the front office has not been good at identifying two-way talent, particularly at the center spot, outside of course, AD, but that was obvious, or on the wings. And like those are the two areas LA needs to improve. Now, first part, the deadline hasn't passed. I know people are acting like the deadline has passed and the Lakers haven't done anything. They still have 3 weeks. Now, if they don't do something, that's a different conversation, and there will be reporting, and I will be able to talk more about where Luka's at with this. But I also think like the one thing that could push LA to do something, I think, would be Luka flexing some of his power, and I'm interested to see how he handles that, because the last trade deadline, he was a Laker for a few days before the deadline, and they did try to get him Mark Williams, and then that ended up getting rescinded. But we know like stars will, if a star wants the team to make a move, they will voice that and they will put some pressure there. And the Lakers are still relatively in the honeymoon phase with Luka in terms of both sides still fresh. It's not even been a year yet, and he obviously signed the extension. They've rolled out the purple and gold carpet for him. So I think it's premature to say he's upset about it, but I'm sure he's not thrilled about how the season's going right now and wants them to improve. So we'll see what they end up doing. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Gabe sucks. Love Buffkin's potential. Think he will start shooting better on offense with more reps. His defense has been bothering guards. Good length. Yeah, I mean that's been the thing that I didn't really know with Kobe and watching some film on him, like how his defense would translate, but I think it's translated well. And it's been a bright spot. But also like he's got an element of like he had a couple drives tonight that again, I'm comparing him to Nick Smith and Dalton and Bronny because I lump those guys all together as either like back end roster players or two-way guys or whatever. And he had some finishes that like Nick Smith and Bronny just can't do either. For Bronny, it's more so just because of his size. With Nick Smith, I would say it's more so the athleticism and like the craftiness in air. And then with Dalton, maybe Dalton could do some of those things, but I think Dalton, his hips are a little tight and he's a little bit more like sort of stiff, where there is there's just an overall like athletic like grace to the way that Kobe can play and attack the basket. So he had a couple nice drives and just sort of like slithering his way to the basket, but also with a level of size, length, athleticism that you can't teach, because that's just like you either have that or you don't, right? That's you have the physical gifts or you don't. You can't grow taller or make yourself that much more athletic. Like you either have those things or you don't. And he has those things. So yeah, I am bullish on Kobe Buffkin, and it's been 2 games, so we have to pump the brakes a little bit with it, but he's made it a real impression, in my opinion, in his 2 first rotation shifts or games. And I think it's been a bright spot. Luka for MVP asks, is there any hope left on the season, Jovan? Yes, but I want to be careful here. Hope for what? Like hope for a championship or hope for... Because Laker fans, obviously, it's championship or bust. So I certainly like my confidence in LA building a championship roster at the deadline, or this group being healthy, or this group, because there's multiple factors here, right? It's not just can you make the right move? It's like, can you get healthy and can you have the runway? Because Lakers are at the 40 game mark. So at the trade deadline, that will be their 50th game of the season. They will have played 49 games going into the trade deadline. Trade deadline night will be their 50th game. At most, that means you have 32 games with, let's just say the Lakers make a big trade. They trade for Herb Jones. They trade for whoever. They have a new starter. They have a new bench. Like they've inserted 3 new pieces into the top 10. Let's just say hypothetically here. Now you have 32 games to get continuity and reps and minutes with those, with the new rotation. And that's assuming everyone's healthy. Like we just talked about, maybe Austin's not back by that point, or maybe someone else suffers a setback. Maybe Luka's groin situation is more serious than we anticipate, or whatever. Then that's a big setback to all of that. So that there's like multiple layers here of, do they even make a move in general, or do they make like a notable move, a move that would actually move the needle? Then can they get healthy enough to actually get the reps, and like, can they figure it out? Because I think that's another element here. So I don't think they figured out, they haven't fully clicked offensively yet, and they haven't figured out the defense. So I'm almost talking myself out of hope as we're talking through this here, but I think those are like 3 big check marks for me, is whether they make a trade or a couple of trades, whether they can get healthy, and that one in particular, you just can't predict. And then the third one would be probably some schematic changes and pushing some of the right buttons more consistently from JJ, which is also one that we can't really predict. Even the trade, we can't really predict, but like we have a little bit of a sense there of who's available, what the prices are, etc. So I would say if they can hit on those 3 things, I think there is hope for a deep playoff run and potential for a deep playoff run. Is it possible that they get to championship level? That I'm less confident in, and I think they're more of a puncher's chance team. But that said, OKC continues to look human. They just lost tonight. The East is, I think, wide open. Like New York hasn't been playing as well. Detroit continues to chug along, but they're unproven. They've yet to win a playoff series as a group. I look at the East and I'm like, whoever's coming out of the East, I'm heavily favoring the West regardless. Like I think it might 4 or 5 game series for the West winner. But the issue is the West has OKC, Denver, Houston, San Antonio, Minnesota, and all those teams are just really, really good. So I think LA could ascend into a certain spot in that hierarchy, but I think it's hard for me to see them being like the best or second best team in the West. So again, it depends what you define as hope, or like what gives you hope. I still think there's a path to a conference finals. I think it's going to be tough to get further than that, but again, like maybe they pull a rabbit out of the hat at the trade deadline. I just think it almost certainly would have to require like a major trade that we just don't foresee right now. All right, I missed a few super chats, so going to go through these and then going to wrap. Chronos, thank you for the super chat. Would a 31 unprotected be enough for Claxton, Gabe, Maxey, DK salaries? I'm so sold on his fit. Then Ayton and 32 second for Najee fills a Dallas need if they move Gafford. 31 unprotected, I think gets you in the conversation for Claxton, and then you're also giving them expiring contracts, and DK has 1 more year left, but it's at a low enough salary that I don't, again, I think right now he's more of a throw-in, but it's not a salary that's going to tank your cap situation, and Brooklyn should be in asset accumulation mode right now. So I think that's a relatively realistic. I don't know if LA would give up the first for Claxton. I think he's more of a borderline guy for them because they were skittish about it last year to a degree. But I think that is a potential like realistic trade framework to my understanding. And then the second one, obviously it depends on if you do the first one, right? If you get Claxton, then I think you could turn your attention to potentially trading Ayton. That's probably a relatively trade Dallas would consider. I think LA, I mean, it would be, if you're bringing in Claxton and you're giving up a first for him, you have to start him and play him a certain amount of time. You can't do that for a bench big. Like that's just not. First round picks are such a valuable commodity that it would have to be like shifting toward Claxton being the guy, at which point Ayton would probably feel alienated and Ayton would probably want out and want to be in a different situation. So maybe that could work. I wonder if you could get a better player than Najee, but I don't, for Ayton having an extra year that he might opt out of anyway, which I guess depending on the team could be a positive or negative. And then the 32-second, I think, has value, especially with it being so far out. But that's an interesting one. I think the first one I think is realistic. The second one, I don't know if Dallas does that, especially just because like Dallas is tanking. Like Dallas is pivoting toward 80s out for the foreseeable future. They might start selling off guys, but maybe getting that 32-second is enough for them. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Vando's defense is just not the same impact as a couple of years. I agree. I think it's been better than earlier in the season, but that was my pushback for people who were upset with him being out. Like he clearly should not have been out of the rotation entirely to the degree that he was, but the people that wanted him starting or playing a certain amount of time, I just don't think he's defended at the same level that really, like, I think about the 2023 run, but even part of 2023-24, he has not defended back to that level. Like the last year and a half, I think he has just not been, like, I think that version of Vando was an all defense, one of the 15 to 20 best perimeter / wing defenders in the league, which might not sound like high praise, but that is, considering every team has like 2 to 4 wing defenders. So saying he's a top 15 to 20, like that's really high praise. He has not been that player for the past year and a half. And I was talking to someone the other day about this, and like they were more so saying that Vando is sort of like an interesting defender because he's so good individually, but he doesn't necessarily raise the collective as much as you would think for someone who has the defensive gifts that he does. Now, I think the pushback to that would be, I think he's awesome in passing lanes, being disruptive, and he's great in that cat and mouse game of he will almost shift over, like someone will start to drive and try to initiate a driving kick, and he kind of puts them in jail where he might fake like he's going back to the shooter, then they start the drive, then he comes over and rotates and pokes the ball loose, or he might stunt over toward them and then they try to throw the pass up and he either deflects it or he's able to rotate back over to that player. So I don't fully agree with that line of thinking, but I do think individually he does his job, but I think he could have a greater impact on like the overall defense in a way that I think he used to. And now it's more so like he goes out there, he does his job, plays good defense, but not great defense. And also I just don't think has the overall impact. And I've just talked about it today. I think the rebounding has slipped and like he hasn't been the same banshee, we will say, as I punch my desk. And then Gary Singh, final one here before we wrap. Do you still consider Luka a top 3 player? Has he been worse, better, or exactly how good you thought he was when the Lakers traded for him? Okay, a couple questions here. I think it's so. I know a lot of people have dropped Luka very far. For me, he's still at worst a top 4 player. I think it's close between he and Giannis for that number 3 spot. I think recently Giannis has been playing better than him. So I if we're doing a what have you done for me lately, I would lean Giannis. If we go like the totality of the season and also just my confidence in like a big game, how Luka is going to play versus how Giannis is going to play. Like Giannis is a big game player and he has plenty of big games under his belt, but he also has not gotten out of the first round for going on over 4 years. So I think in my overall, if I'm ranking like the big picture, just doing who I have where, I still think I would have Luka at number 3. I think Jokic and Shea are 1 and 2 in that order, and it's not really debatable right now. In terms of where I had him when the Lakers traded for him, I Luka at number 2, and I referenced that immediately after the trade of like earlier in the season, someone had asked me like, who are your top 5 players? I had Jokic 1, Luka 2, and then I don't remember the 3 through 5 order. So I've always been high on Luka. I think with the second half of the season that Shea had, including winning the championship, completing one of the best guard seasons of all time statistically and from an efficiency perspective, really being neck and neck with Jokic in a lot of advanced metrics, and then winning the title and being finals MVP, I nudged up Shea to number 2, but I still think Luka has a ceiling where he can be number 2 or even number 1 on a given night and outplay those guys in a head-to-head matchup. But I do think overall, like those two guys are number 1 and number 2 in some order in basically every metric. That is just undeniable. I think those are the 2 best teams in the league. They're the 2 best teams in the West. It's just, it's not really like Luka's fault that he just happens to be playing at the same time as those 2 guys. But certainly, if depending on how the rest of the season goes, he could fight back into number 2 or even number 1. I'm not ruling it out. So no, I'm not. Some people have dropped him outside the top 5 or even outside the top 10. I think that's crazy. I still have him number 3. But with all that said, I'm going to wrap here. Again, we got a game tomorrow night. I got packing and moving tomorrow. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow night after the Lakers play the Raptors. I'll talk to you all then.